Greetings and salutations, everyone. Welcome back to the Inn of Planar Crossroads. And also, welcome back to our... this will probably go under Nightmare Lairs, but we're going to say that this is our Around the Hearth chat for Nightmare Lairs because it fits the same time slot. And we're going to be talking, as you guys probably already know from the thumbnail, non-combat encounters. We're kind of going to look at several. Maybe, depending on how the chat goes, we will do them based upon, have more of a slant towards traps, since we're going to kind of talk about those next time, or other things. It just depends. We'll probably go with lots of different things, knowing us, as far as non-combat encounters, because we're so good about staying on topic. But
oh god, our fucking chats are a non-combat encounter.
It's our number one rating on Google Podcasts is it just is 5 stars, always on topic.
Never just screaming about how much swamps suck.
Yeah,
swamps are terrible.
They are awful.
All right. Well, first off, we've got to say who's here. Unfortunately, we didn't get to have either Avenue Studios guest starring or Black Dragon Gaming, so bummer there. But we do have, at least us four, we have myself, Adam L. Spain, from the Inn of Planar Crossroads, which you guys should know me already. But we also have Kane, who's right there according to my display, Connor, and then Levi. And Kane... yeah. Kane kind of does stuff with both this channel and Black Dragon Gaming, so, you can find him in both places.
I'm all over. I get around, man.
And
I've everywhere, man.
And Levi doesn't have anything for us to plug yet, so we have to keep giving him a hard time about that. But Kane and Connor have been talking about doing a podcast, so if you want to see them do a riff podcast kind of like this one with other subjects, let them know in the comment section below. So I'll be sure to relay that to them.
I mean, that'd be nice if I had something to plug. I'm just some dude right now.
I mean, hey, man, you're the best GM I know. That's your plug.
That's my plug.
I'm literally just some dude.
I don't even know what you look like.
That's going to be like your whole brand name, just some dude. Well, we need to get on topic. Aside from that brandable service of just some dude, I'm not sure where we want to start with this. We'll probably let Connor kind of lead in, since this particular type of topic, he was talking specifically about traps, but other things can be non-combat encounters too, so we're going to let him go off on the things that he was interested in talking about first.
All right, this might not actually have anything to do with anything, because I literally got off work, sat down, and here we are. So,
same.
Yeah. But basically, a non-combat encounter, from the way I understand them, is pretty much any challenge presented to the player can be that doesn't involve punching, stabbing, shooting, magic. Well, it can if you do them wrong enough, but
any machine is a smoke machine if operated poorly enough.
But this includes interrogation, negotiation with other NPCs. It can be a trapped room. It can be an athletic skill check or anything like that. The point with D&D or even Pathfinder, it all comes back to numbers. It's all, you roll the dice, do this check, blah, 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 with a little bit of character or player ideas in there, stuff that they think will solve the issue. But you want to flavor it in such ways. God, I'm stumped.
I'm
trying to think of one that I've done that I could throw in.
All right, I'll talk while you think of that.
I was basically actually remember them better than I do.
I was just gonna say I kind of have the most common non-combat encounters broken down into puzzles, riddles, mechanisms, and social encounters, because those are mostly the problems you run into that you can't fix by hitting it with a hammer or shooting a fireball at it.
Ostensibly.
There are definitely a couple puzzles I've run into that I could solve by hitting it with a hammer. But those are, weird edge cases. And I feel like the best non-combat encounters usually somehow integrate two or more of the aforementioned categories together. Usually by like running, we mentioned this I think before the cameras started rolling. Sudoku is great. You just have to put an arcane crossbow in a corner somewhere, so every time you mess up a line, you catch a bolt in the butt cheek.
Yeah.
There's also the common joke of DMs looking up riddles for toddlers.
Oh yeah, good puzzles for toddlers.
And the crew just being completely unable to deal.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get a little punch drunk. It's been 4 hours. You've had a couple beers, You want to roll some dice and punch some orcs. I'm not here to try and figure out that the square block goes in the square hole, all right? It's too much for me right now.
Look, when you are traveling the ley lines across the planet, you have to be able to answer the riddles to get the passwords to go through the ley lines, okay? I mean, you can't they're not going to let just anybody go through. I'm just saying.
Oh, speaking of a social encounter you can solve with a hammer, the Sphinx.
That presumes that you're strong enough to do anything about that Sphinx.
I mean, yes, that does presume that you are strong enough to do anything about the Sphinx, but, like, theoretically, every Sphinx encounter should start off as, like, a quasi-social puzzle encounter where they're like, answer my riddles 3, or I will devour thee! Meh, 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 meh. But that's a social encounter that if things go pear-shaped, you can always just solve it with fucking with bullet casings.
Barbarian is bored and has to pee.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, they don't always need to involve, as you were saying, they don't always have to involve dice checks. They can be a riddle for the players. They can, but I do got to say, got to stay with the role play, which is, I just know, Kane, if I'm ever a player for you, I'm very good at puzzles and riddles. If I play a barbarian, I will purposefully whiff them.
Yeah. And on that, and on the purpose of being very good at puzzles, I'm also pretty good at puzzles. It depends on the day. Sometimes my brain is potato salad. But to mention one of the non-combat encounters Connor has run for me, we were in a dungeon and we came across a room where the door shut behind us or something. And we realized once we were in the room that the floor was covered in 2 or 3 inches of standing lamp oil.
Oh, good.
And in the middle of the room was a large stone figure that we realized when we got up to it was basically a humanoid comprised entirely of flint. Which turned out to be a golem that was designed to present us riddles. And every time you got a riddle right, the golem got smaller. And if you got a riddle wrong, it would strike its arms together and light the room on fire.
It was either that, or I think it was either that, or it would just attack, and then you'd have to figure out how to fight it without hitting it.
Oh, right, yes, yeah, we'd have to figure out how to subdue it or grapple it or something without hitting it with a piece of metal that would cause a spark.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, you walked in and your guy was the brainiac in the group, and he saw that, and immediately to the fighter or whatever or the rogue was like, "Put that fucking sword away." It's not the time.
That's a weird thought, isn't it, Adam, that I was playing the smart character?
Well, oh my god, he did it so well, too.
Well, see, it's just that he likes to play the others so much. He just hides his intelligence, is what it is. Yes. He just makes the GM.
I'm trying to lower your expectations.
Well, it's funny, King, because now I remember the one in the same dungeon that I actually remember you, Blake, and Malcolm talking about this the other day, because Stephanie got very angry during it.
Yeah,
and you guys
she hated that puzzle.
Yeah, and I realized you guys left out the detail of why she got angry. It was basically a D&D version of an improv game where you're supposed to guess what's wrong with the other person. So basically, they walked in. They all had these 3 gems that were in the middle of the floor. They picked them up. Whoever touched them first was afflicted with a curse. The curse caused, I would secretly tell them what they had to do, what their new character quirk was for the duration of that curse. And the only way to dispel it and be able to put the gem in the slot or whatever they needed, I don't remember what the exact solution was to have one of the people who wasn't afflicted properly guess what their problem was. The reason Stephanie got so mad is because I think, what was it? I think William wasn't allowed to use any words with the letter H in them.
That sounds correct.
I think yours was hilarious. You were suddenly afraid of a certain word.
I was afraid of a letter.
M.
Yeah, it was W. It was I think, or something like that.
It was W or P or something, and anytime I heard a word that had that letter in it, I would just go, ah!
Something very common.
I think that part got solved by Steph just talking and then slowing down as you screamed. And then eventually Lily just got in Sal's face and went, W. And you were like, ah! And she's like, okay, there it is. But the reason Steph got so mad is she didn't realize it was part of the RP encounter. Was because
she just thought we were insane.
No. It was specifically Kira's. Because Kira's was... she could only talk while Lily was talking.
Right. Yeah.
So you got
two idiots who are constantly pausing to make sure the words that are being spoken, not only the words that are being spoken, but the words that are being spoken by 2 different people at the same time do or do not have certain letters in them.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
it was chaos and confusion, but it was great for me, not them.
Well, that puzzle's really hard on anybody from Canada, I would guess, or anybody from the South, because you just don't want to interrupt people.
Well, and see, we're all Canadian, and Stephanie, Connor's lady wife, is from Florida, so she's Southern.
So she doesn't, you don't interrupt people when you're talking, and then...
Exactly. It was targeted to piss her off, and that was my fault. Because I thought it was funny because I'm an asshole. But
it was pretty funny.
It was pretty funny.
Fair enough. So those are a few ways that encounters can go. And like Kane brought up, there's several different methods in which you can use those encounters. So we've talked about traps, and we've mentioned a little bit about the puzzles and different things like that. And if you do end up using puzzles in your games, make sure that you have them engage with some consequence. Have them have some consequences. Otherwise, they'll just brute force keep saying things.
Yeah.
If there's no consequence to it and it's a riddle, then people could just walk up to it and say random things until they finish it.
Mm-hmm. I say alternately have the puzzle be transportable, such that they can try it every once in a while, every couple of sessions, as opposed to a necessary right this second sort of thing.
Oh yeah, we've also done stuff like that. Like the one of the incidental treasure pieces from a dungeon is a puzzle box. Mm-hmm. We got a hold of a puzzle box that had a very powerful magical item in it that I spent a bunch of time on your
fucking head.
We spent a bunch of time. I spent a bunch of time in between sessions trying to figure out, because it was driving me up the wall.
Yeah, it was like a 64 square puzzle I made.
Yeah,
it was like a sliding puzzle, but it was like monstrous.
It was a huge Rubik's Cube. It
drove the fourth boy mad, and that was kind of the point. Honestly, it was a madness thing. So,
well,
I think I did.
I kind of like the idea of what the consequence that is being brought up with Levi's is, well, you only have this amount of time, and if you don't figure it out, then it leaves. That you can also build off of that in a different way, where the consequence is each time you miss, it may appear often. It may always be somewhere on the planet or in the land or whatever, however big you want your campaign to be. But if you get it wrong, it leaves and goes somewhere else. And then you have to travel all the way across, say, the desert to go and find it again. Or you got to go a whole other continent from once you get word that it's over there. And you make, if you're going to have a consequence like that, you got to make it worth getting in. So there's also that.
I'll be perfectly honest. I almost did that with the puzzle box.
No.
But I know that if I had done that, Kane's character would manifest physically and strangle me.
Yeah, I would have deep within the psyche of that character. My face just would have gone completely expressionless, and I would have just leapt across the table, arms extended.
Dude, Sal was manic for that box.
Mm-hmm.
But oh fuck, what was I gonna say? Oh shit, come back to me. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you first.
I was going to say the other school of thought, sort of, to making puzzles or riddles or whatever for your game, is if you're not very good at coming up with riddles, like I'm very bad at coming up with riddles, just come up with the rizzles. Come up with the first half of the puzzle or challenge, and basically just let your party run into it face first until they come up with something that you're like, I like that works.
Yeah.
I was going to say, that's one of those things that DMs do that they don't admit they do.
Oh, I freely admit that if I've got a riddle and the players give me an answer that would work, I'm probably going to let them have it. Because it can get really specific. Like the riddle game that you see in The Hobbit is fine, but that whole question of what's in my pocket, that's not a fair riddle. That's not a fair riddle. Sorry. Bilbo did cheat. Okay?
Yep.
But he cheated to save his life.
Well, so. Gollum could have said air, and he would have been correct.
That's true. But then
I don't think they were operating on honor.
Well, Gollum definitely wasn't. But what's funny about that, it does explain some interesting things, just small tangent. It explains some interesting things about the idea of the way magic works in Lord of the Rings, because it talks about the riddle game being respected and sacred. And you don't break the riddle game for some reason in the thing. Obviously for narrative reasons, so that Gollum wouldn't just kill him. But it implies that there's some kind of repercussion for doing so. So perhaps something like that could be incorporated into your non-combat encounters. Being willing to engage in whatever this is, if you break the rules, there are consequences for not just not answering correctly, but breaking the rules to succeed. And there's some form of arbitration through a higher power or someone that's just stronger or more knowledgeable or has a way to know whether you're cheating or not. And that would be a way to discourage your scoundrel characters from cheating or encourage them to come up with very, 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 very tricky ways to cheat the game.
You got to make big moves. Big brain moves.
I would have loved for somebody to do something so incomprehensible that you just fizzle out the puzzle and it just like... Actually, wait, didn't that happen? There was something... Somebody did something, I remember, so stupid. No, it was an answer to one of the riddles with the golem that was so dumb, but so funny that I made a joke that from behind the wall, you just heard, ha! And then it accepted it.
No, I remember it was a William answer, and the answer was I don't remember what the question was, but I know the answer was an ass kicking.
Fair enough.
Oh, William was so good for those fucking like dry one-liners.
Those, yes, just incredibly. If you could like derive the sort of the quintessence of like dry British humor down into a person, that's our friend William.
Sounds both entertaining and somewhat annoying in certain circumstances.
It is, and we love it.
Because dry humor taken to really dry humor is really tough to figure out. Are they serious? Like, what is that? Do they mean it, or are they just? Like,
no, that was the beautiful thing. Is you somehow always knew when he was joking.
Okay.
That's it's you really acclimatize. Yeah,
I guess you got it the first time.
via proximity. I had the same problem actually a while with my roommate because he's got a very, very dry sense of humor, and I'm like, I can't tell if you're being facetious or if I should call a doctor.
But I was going to say another non-combat. Actually, wait, I'll save that one for when we're talking about examples because I just remembered the really good one.
Perfect. But yeah, I would reiterate if you're gonna build your own non-combat encounters, which I fully recommend you do. You look at like the category of like puzzle, riddle, which I know are very similar but not explicitly. Puzzle, riddle, mechanism, which is generally the trap sort of thing. You do a thing and something else happens, and the social encounter, and combine two or more of those things together into one non-combat encounter. And that can involve stuff like you can also, I would take these things and include them in certain combat encounters if you want to make a real set piece out of it, especially like sort of social or otherwise non-combat encounters that happen congruently with combat encounters, like sort of the moving fight scenes in the second Pirates of the Caribbean is a good example of that. There's a bunch of very, very intricate set pieces that occur in that movie, like the fight on the water wheel and stuff like that.
Oh yeah,
which is like clearly a combination of a skill challenge because you have to stay on the wheel without falling off, and a combat because they're trying to murder each other with swords and get a key.
Well, I was going to say, actually, you bring that up. A great example of a non-combat encounter that looks like a combat encounter. The very beginning of Road del Dorado.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Well, exactly.
They get caught by the Conquistador police for gambling with loaded dice.
And then they fight each other.
Yeah, they're making a bunch of performance checks.
Yeah, exactly. It's all performance.
Performance and bluff checks to convince the onlookers that they're really at each other's throats, but it's just haha, we're doing our bit. We're doing a bit where we pretend to kill each other so we can get out of here.
And that's like peak Bard and Rogue shenanigan.
Yeah.
Which I think the lesson of is that if your players have an interesting way to transition another type of encounter to a non-combat encounter, it can lead to more interesting stories if you allow them to do so.
That's actually the best point. Yeah, never, even if you make a combat encounter, never ever like lock in that it's a combat encounter. If your players can find a way around it that's clever enough and they can make the checks and everything, you should reward them for that kind of thinking. That's the kind of thing you want from your player. Don't just be like, no, I planned this fight. We're going to fight now.
This is something that I see when you look in the, like, most of the modern RPGs that you're getting in tabletops are like, D&D 5e, Pathfinder 1e, Pathfinder 2e, especially D&D 4, everything from, I guess, like 3.5, 3 onward, had a lot more focus on, there was the rules, of course, but there was also that idea that you were playing a game, and that game had codes and lists of different things that were applicable to each and every scenario. Even if you're in 5e, which is really, 5e is a lot looser with those type of restrictions, it's not a narrative game. It is a game that you have a narrative with. You play a narrative with it. I was watching a video earlier, and it was talking about kind of like that. and they mentioned the difference between war as sport and war as war. War. And D&D from 3 onward seems to be more like a war as sport versus war as war.
Yeah, the second edition and earlier on, there's very much a narrative of like life is cheap, people are replaceable. And I mean, you can play characters up into the higher levels, and once you get there, you're very formidable. But if you're fighting things that are like, and I shudder to use the phrase challenge appropriate for editions like second and earlier. There's still always the chance that you just like, because in those earlier editions, you would run into stuff like a dragon's breath weapon had a DC, and if you didn't meet the DC, you just died.
Yeah.
There's a black dragon. He's here. He's going to breathe the acid on you, make you save. And the save is like, I don't know, let's call it an adult dragon. The save is like a DC 16. You roll a 15, you don't take damage. You are now a puddle of soup.
Yeah.
Okay, so DC is the wrong word for this, but it brings up the same point. It was jank.
Yeah, it was mad jank.
Like, you had different scaling based off of what class you were. You had tables for it. You didn't even look at them. You just rolled.
Well, in the older... It depends on how far back you want to go and stuff like that. The reason I bring it up is because if war is sport, then you have to play fair then there's that expectation of fairness with your players. And that's understandable because you guys are... This isn't to say one's better than the other, because it's a different type of game. I don't play Skyrim for the reasons I play Stardew Valley or, a different game. You play those games for different reasons and you can have fun with both.
Maybe you do.
Yeah. I mean, you can kill monsters in Stardew Valley, but it ain't going to be like Skyrim. And you can't farm in Skyrim. So, well... fair enough. But the idea is you're buying into this game together. So the challenges that you're going to have, whether they're non-combat or not, are going to be different for someone who's playing a really gritty, harder game, or less merciful game, and someone who's playing a game for epic stories or different things like that. Even though epic stories can happen in both, one's got sport and fairness, and the other is, if you want to figure this trap out, think. Because that is something that's different from old school traps versus new traps. New traps, you can do a lot of checks, and they're balanced around checks that you make. They have DCs balanced around how good you are or expected to be at different things with different milestones, and these dungeons that they make, the pre-made dungeons that they make for you, those are going to be balanced around characters that have that. You go to older editions where war is war, that's where you get to have things like the kobolds that will wreck you.
Oh, Tucker's kobolds?
Yes.
Yeah, that's where you run into, like, Tucker's kobolds, or the, what is the death trap steamroller thing that shows up in the OG...
you mean the thing that was in Labyrinth?
Yeah. Oh my God! Now that you bring it up,
that is.
That's the thing in Labyrinth.
Oh my God!
Come on, you guys! Come on!
Cool.
I'd never drawn that parallel before.
Labyrinth is just a weird D&D game.
That's true.
That's fair.
Yeah,
That's
I would play in a D&D game that David Bowie ran. It would be all crystal balls and weird tunnels.
Maybe that came out just the way you meant it, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it did.
Well, there was lots of fuzzy creatures running around in those tunnels, too, and I'm not into that. I'm just like, no.
Well, I got very confused for a second because you said Labyrinth, and then I thought of Pan's Labyrinth, and then you said David Bowie, and now I'm imagining David Bowie as the guy in Pan's Labyrinth.
As Pan in Pan's Labyrinth?
As the Mitch McConnell stand-in?
Oh.
Dance, magic dance!
Just replace the Pale Man with the Goblin King.
Yeah, you can do that.
That's a different fucking movie on both sides.
Yeah, I want to see
Labyrinth with the Pale Man.
Please, can we get a hold of Guillermo del Toro and ask him to do a soft reboot of Labyrinth?
I don't know. I don't know that he has the musical chops for that one.
The man is
consultants.
insane, and I love it. So I don't know. You don't know
that
that
is-
though.
That is terrible nightmare fuel, and I hate that we have discovered this together. But yeah, it's. I mean, the current popular thing to get us back on track is 5th edition and Pathfinder 2nd edition, and all of these, as in this gaming renaissance, the sort of the 1,000,001 other tabletops, especially the more narrative heavy tabletops, you would run into where puzzles would really be more of the thing. I would assume you would do, because it in a really narrative heavy game, fights just sort of happen and then you move along. So in these narrative heavy systems and in the more modern versions of Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder, your puzzles, I think, probably will lead more on the towards the spectrum of like war is a sport, where they are expected to be measured and fair and solvable, and not you walk into this room and you didn't notice the crazy red laser dot sight on your forehead and now you've exploded into giblets.
Well, I think the difference that we can run to also is that, or bring up, is that a narrative game doesn't necessarily have easier puzzles. It has puzzles that are solvable without rolling.
Yes.
You can have a lot more puzzles without rolling while still being true to the system. And I mean like trap style puzzles, not like social encounters, because those can be done also. But that also brings up the problem that can arise with certain if games are run too close to the rules, because it's not always fun to talk about, but those rules are just guidelines, and they sometimes need to change when your game's going a certain way and you're wanting to. You've got this barbarian who just made this great epic speech. Does he get to give inspiration to anybody? Well, no, he's not a bard.
What's the fuck him? He's a barbarian. Why is he talking? I'm kidding.
So you kind of have to bend those rules if you're going to play true to the story rather than true to the system. But that's going to be something that people are going to have to deal with at their table. So the best way to do that is to feel that out at your table. If you guys like dungeon crawls, like you were gamers and you like dungeon crawls above all, then that's a way to go for it. If you focus on those, you can run it where war is war if you want to, and really focus in on that, but you got to have players on board for it. Otherwise, if you really think about it, Magic is way OP, and nobody's going to get into that dungeon unless that wizard is okay, has a specific flaw in his logic that he used to get there, and stuff like that. So it can be really tricky. One of the books that actually does this somewhat well is the way that Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or the Philosopher's Stone, whichever title it has in your country, talked about the passages that was being gone through as they were trying to get into the Sorcerer's Stone near the end. And in the movie, they got rid of the one that Snape did. But in
the potion one.
The mixing of potions. So you had like you had Fluffy, who was just the basic combat encounter, and then you had a thinking encounter where you had a vine that would choke you and stuff, and that's a really good subversion of the combat that was just above, and so you can use that as an idea. And then they had a strategic game, which wizards can be good at, and that had to be played out, and then somebody had to do something athletic, something demanding of physical ability but not combat ability, which was the chasing down of the key. And then after that was Snape's, if I remember my sequence correct. And it was after the key. So it was it was a logic-based puzzle. And in the world of Harry Potter, one of the flaws that the wizards have is that they're very creative, they're very right-brained, but they have trouble with logic. And that's what made Snape unique amongst the professors, and that's why he put a potions problem in there, where you had to mix the potions appropriately according to logical reasoning. And it would frustrate...
I forgot about that. That's books.
That's in the books.
Yeah.
So use those different series of encounters, non-combat encounters, most of them, could allow your characters and your players to have a lot of fun reasoning those things out. And it highlights a flaw that can be integrated into your games. Picking, and that's something you've got to do with your world building and how your particular characters think about it. You got as we would put it in like D&D and Pathfinder, the wizards are high int, but they're low wisdom. Unless you're a specific kind of wizard. And that was a wisdom puzzle. It was a logic. It was a, back and forth thing. So you can do those different type of things. We're at 36 minutes. So, or 37 now. Final thoughts.
Puzzles are dope.
Yeah, puzzles are cool. Any encounter is cool. Let your players be creative. Let yourself be creative. Don't get locked into thinking something has to be a fight. Don't get locked into thinking there's only one answer.
If you can, I know. If you somehow worked through all of the other more impressive people in the D&D community to come to this video, I'm sure you've already stumbled across Matt Colville talking about the Book of Challenges from 3rd edition 3.5. If you can get a hold of a PDF of that book, or God forbid somehow a physical copy of that book, that is an incredible resource of just like traps and puzzles and encounters. Pre-made, ready to use. It's a great resource, and there's so many resources online you can find if you're struggling to come up with non-combat encounters that will just help you do that sort of stuff.
Just as a self-taught DM, I want to say, use those resources. Don't feel bad about it, because using them helps you learn what makes them good.
Yeah.
Like, if your players have fun, pay attention, and you'll learn. It's natural.
Yeah. And imitation is the most sincere form of affection. So basically, plagiarism is a love letter to all of your favorite work. So,
fair enough.
And, next time we meet, I'll tell people about the Madman's Game, because that was one of my favorite encounters that we never got to do.
Dum, dum, dum. There you go. All right, any last final words from this particular topic from you, Levi?
Basically, try and make sure everyone has fun. And make sure that if you make something really hard and annoying, that there's actually some reward at the end of it.
Yes. Don't just have a trap to have
make
a trap.
Make it worth their time.
Don't do the bait and switch. Nobody likes that. It's not fun. If you do it, your players will not engage with your future traps.
Yeah. I mean, just think about when you were playing Skyrim, did you like that when by the time you got to that end of that dungeon that someone had stolen the horn of Jorgen Windcaller and made you go back all the way down to Riverwood? Just throwing that out there.
All right. Skyrim stands.
All right. Well, thank you all for for coming to our chat today. We have, as far as announcements, I do want to say something. We are going to be putting kind of any kind of front part or back part that is just us riffing at the end after the outro of these things. So I'll probably put that front part that was that huge long lead up in the back so that everybody can still enjoy it, but we can get on topic sooner than we did. But
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
All right. The whole time.
On topic the whole time.
All right. Well, as always, everyone, have a great day. God bless and enjoy. Bye.
Later.
Bye.
This content was made possible by travelers and viewers like you. Thank you.
some dude.
And then you can put just some dude talks about ... And then you can
Just
have
some
like
dude rambles.
That
Yeah.
should be that should be the name of your YouTube or your podcast or whatever. It should be just some dude.
There you go. And you have other.
That's very
people.
marketable.
Yeah.
It's very marketable.
See.
You can just do that and then have like ads for it be like the lowest quality, lowest effort thing possible, and it fits.
Remember those?
Like,
remember
you've heard
those?
of Manscaped, right?
You-
can
yeah,
play
you-
with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just some dude who's got a hairy crotch, and Manscaped helps me solve that problem.
Well, that
Wow,
sounds
we're on topic already.
Yeah, all right. So anyways,
sounds like a non-combat encounter right there.
that is a non-combat encounter, but you will take psychic damage the more I talk about shaving my cojones.
So,
The shave is
His
all right.